I'm gonna give myself a third leg.
Okay, everybody, we are live with the Producers Hangout. Another fresh episode for everybody. This is a small episode. We've got myself, Flux of fluxwithit.com. You can find me on YouTube at, YouTube/Flux302. We've also got with us Richard London of London Sound Labs. And we've got Casey Brubaker, producer, engineer, man about town. And so today we're gonna have a kind of short show, and we'll get right into it about some of the things that we've got going on. So most recently, I posted about how I was doing some found sound recordings for some sound packs, and I spoke to Richard, who is also a sound designer, and he was talking about some projects that he was working on with some found sounds as well. And I thought it might be an interesting topic to just kind of talk about alternative sound sources, outside of the box, which would be an interesting contrast to what Casey's working on right now, which is making inside the box sounds sound like outside of the box sounds. So I guess first what I'll start off and say is, so my project is basically I'm actually working on two different projects at once right now. So one is a sample expansion pack, so I'll be taking sounds that are not traditionally drums and turning them into drums. And Rich, why don't you tell us a little bit about the project that you're working on?
Over the summer, I worked at a summer camp, and I was teaching the science of sound at a science camp. And so I was talking to the people who run it, and we're trying to convince them to do a new course on sound design, preferably using machine. And so basically we wrote out an outline. They love it, and so what we're doing now is a 2-minute Kickstarter type video, kind of showcasing what the course is about, to show it to the head honchos. And so basically the whole idea of the course is that kids will go around, collect some sounds, load it up into a machine, and make something cool with it. And so yesterday I spent the day collecting up some sounds, some just like random stuff, made a track with it, videotaped it, and now we have to edit the video and make it look cool, and that's the job of tonight.
So what were some of the tools that you were using? I see you had a water bottle there. What else?
The instruments that we used were a water bottle, a bell being hit with a screwdriver. What else is on the floor here? Some glass things being hit together. Toothbrush buzz. And what else? One more thing. Yeah, I don't remember. But wait, what was it? Yeah, I don't remember. Oh, some rocks. I had a handful of rocks that are still on my floor, just going like this into the mic. I don't know if you can see.
Now, were you doing most of the recordings just in your apartment studio, or were you taking them out somewhere else, or how were you going about that? Did the quality of the sounds matter so much, or was it more just about getting the different textures?
It was more about getting the textures, and it was more about getting it done quick. So I took my piano bench over here, I put the camera on it, put a mic, just laid the mic down on the camera bench, and just did the sounds really quick in 2 minutes into the mic. It was done with terrible technique, and but for the purpose of the assignment, it was good.
Okay.
It was about doing something quick.
Now, Casey, why don't you tell us a little bit about the thing that you were just telling me about off air, about what you've been playing with?
So I got an assignment, college assignment for an electronic composition course, and the goal is to take a variety of instruments. I just chose drums, acoustic guitar, and a wind instrument. I chose an oboe as mine, and basically the goal is to just make them sound like they're being recorded live versus being sampled and using a MIDI controller to trigger the samples. And just the techniques that I was using basically are just strumming techniques, just note velocity, playing with that, note length, just messing with the attack, you know, to try to just to do anything I can to make it sound, you know, authentic. And I was really surprised. I'm almost finished with the little project I made, and it turned out well. So I mean, it definitely can be done. It's not easy, but it definitely can be done.
Now, some of the techniques that that I was getting involved in, and I do this a lot, is so whereas Rich's project is more about getting the sounds quick and dirty, and it's more about just the texture and less about, you know, the standard of quality, because it's being used for a, you know, different purpose. Whereas on my end, I'm more going for both sound quality, texture, and I also have to keep in mind editability. All right, so when I'm recording the sounds, I may record, you know, a few gigabytes worth of audio files in one chunk, and then I have to go through, I have to edit everything, slice them all into individual files, have them all named in a way that I can actually organize it, and then I also have to be prepared to edit the samples with post-production techniques as well. So today was a lot of high SPL recordings, actually a combination between high SPL percussive recordings and then also very quiet contact mic recordings and close miking of things. So for instance, one technique that I was doing is I set up 2 overhead mics above a dumpster. So I was getting a stereo image coming out of the dumpster, and then I set a contact mic on each side of the metal plating on the dumpster, and then I was throwing things into the dumpster. So I was recording 4 channels at once, and then blending them together. And later on, I'll have to, you know, make sure that the phase is all correct and everything, because it's a field recording, so I'm not in a studio environment where I can, you know, properly meter. I mean, all I really have is a set of headphones and, you know, my recorder, and I brought a few pieces of fun toys out there with me. I had a large concrete garage to work with a lot of metal inside of there, a lot of different gear that I can play with. So I was doing things like I would set mics at different intervals inside of the garage so that I can pick up different amounts of reverb throughout the room, be it a close mic and a far away mic, and then you know, a medium placement. And I would do things like you know, taking 2 different types of metals and kind of pulling them apart and scraping them. The challenge with a lot of that stuff that I tend to find is so I'm using these sounds to eventually become musical sounds. Like, they won't just stay as Foley. You know, they'll be turned into kicks, snares, hi-hats, toms, all kinds, you know, in a general resemblance of that. So I have to find ways to, you know, use these sounds and try to kind of predictively say, okay, well, I'm gonna take this large metal canister and I'm going to strike it this way, and hopefully it has a kind of snarish timbral quality. And of course, you know, you go through them later on to try and dig through them and find what works best for what.
Plus,
But
what I found when I was doing it, I was trying to make a kick drum out of this. The reason I chose this was because I thought it could turn into a decent kick. And when I sat and tried to turn it into a kick, I had a hard time. I had a hard time making a kick that actually worked in a mix. I was wondering if you had techniques. How do I turn this into a good sounding kick? What I did was I picked it down, I changed the envelope. I was wondering if you had ideas on...
the first order of business for me on something like that is mic placement. So depending on what type of mics you're using and where you're placing them and how you're striking it is going to drastically change how you get the sound. Now, if you have, like, say, a pencil condenser and you can stick it inside of there, and then get something, be it a rubber mallet, you know, a palm strike, a good solid thuddy kind of hit, you're going to start off getting those deeper tones. But a lot of the do if I'm doing something like that. And also, like I said, I love using contact mics. You can get those deeper waves in that way with a contact mic with the resonance and everything as well. But I'll double mic it, you know, so that I'm getting the outside hit so you're getting that attack, that smack sound like the beater on a kick drum,
Right.
and then the inside or even the porthole of the water bottle, I try to get, you know, the more thuddy, you know, deeper tones.
See, I wasn't thinking. I put the mic where I was hitting it. It should have definitely been at the end of the bottle, at the hole of the bottle.
Yeah.
That's where I
Mic
should have placed the
placement
mic.
to me seems to be like
I was rushing.
paramount.
Yeah.
So one thing that you run into problematic-wise for contact mics a lot is that it's very easy to, if you're doing percussive sounds, it's very, very easy to make them clip, like to make them clip on the input, you know, like not even level-wise, you know, just going outside of the range of the transducer. And if you do that, you get these very, you know, kind of square, wavy, angular shapes that sometimes can be cool, but for the most part aren't what you're shooting for.
Right.
So a lot of the times it will depend on where you're placing them and how hard you're striking something. You have to be very conscious of that. When I was miking up the dumpster, certain areas you could mic and certain areas you couldn't mic because you know, it would just be too much vibration for it, and it would cause problems. One of the field pieces that I like to use a lot is this guy, the Zoom H4n, because it's very versatile as far as how you can mic things and play with things on the fly, like really quickly. So I bring an audio interface and a laptop, and then I also bring that. So just to give an example, I'll plug. This is literally the card that I was recording on today, and I'll plug it in just to give like a small example of some different timbral aspects. Now, Casey, when you were doing your project, you were dealing with trying to turn these MIDI instruments and make them sound as realistic as possible. Do you find making them sound like they're in a realistic space? How do you approach that? Do you just slap a flat reverb, or do you bust them out, or how are you working with that?
It's really, you gotta be really careful, because I did use some reverb and delay effects, but you gotta be careful and not over implement those kinds of things, because those can, for one, mask the authenticity as well, and which you don't want. You don't want it to just sound like some cool. I mean, it may sound cool with all kinds of reverb on it, but it doesn't necessarily mean that's going to sound real.
Yeah.
So yeah, really light reverb, light delay is how I achieve kind of the after effects basically, and the sustains, to messing around with that. And the other thing is, a lot of people, if they're trying to do this same thing, they might not take into consideration that instruments have ranges. Like you can't, you got 88 keys on a keyboard. It doesn't necessarily mean that the flute you're playing can go, a real flute player could not play from A to Z on that MIDI controller. So you got to keep in mind the ranges of the instruments as well when you're trying to recreate, an instrument to sound real, because that's going to be a big thing,
I studied that stuff in school.
Yeah.
It's definitely good to know your ranges and stuff. When it comes to virtual instruments, for me though, I like to only use like sample-based instruments that sound real right off the bat. Like I want the preset to sound good. Like when I just put it on, and there's certain libraries out there for certain instruments that really just nail it right off the bat. I don't want to have to deal with all the mixing afterwards. I want it to be. I'm not a mixer, so I just want it to sound good right off the bat. In certain instruments, with certain ones, you can get it. But still, there's a lot of instruments that you really can't do yet with samples. Guitars are really tough.
Yeah.
Guitars are tough. I do like some of the virtual instruments out there, and I think like Casey was saying, there's a lot of technique that goes into how you're going to play it, because inherently a simple MIDI keyboard is nowhere near as expressive as an actual guitar. I mean, guitar is one of the most expressive instruments out there. So there's a lot that has to go into trying to make that, you know, come off properly and come off real.
More than likely, you're going to have to enter your own inconsistencies most of the time, because you know you're not going to be able to play it the same on a keyboard as you are the actual instrument. It's just not going to happen.
I know when it comes to building instruments, I'm staying away from guitars and pianos right off the bat because they're too hard to get them to sound real. Other instruments are much easier to recreate, so those are my first ones.
Yeah, I will say that certain instruments I've never really liked that were not, you know, acoustically recorded. Ranking high up there for me is saxophone and just horns in general. Yeah. There are some great horn libraries out there, but especially for the type of music that I like to make personally, there's something about horns in a live setting with a band around them that really just like changes everything. Like it changes
the mix. If you have a trombone and a trumpet playing together, they resonate against each other and it changes the tone. When they're in the same room together, it's not the same as if you take one contact instance of a trumpet and one contact instance of a tuba and play them together. You're not going to get that same resonance that happens in the room.
Yeah, exactly. I find that some of the software instruments out there that really impress me, that are not, you know, typical synthesizer instruments. There's been a lot done in recent years with string libraries that I think are really impressive, and even some choir libraries too. I mean, there's been some choir libraries that are really mind-blowing. Usually, you really need to invest money in order to get sound libraries that are, you know, of those sorts that are actually reaching those boundaries. But there are some out there that are really just mind-blowing. So, and I'm also not opposed to if the project allows for it, if you can use loops and things, there are some great loop libraries out there, especially when it comes to even the horn stuff.
I use loops for horns. I'll chop a little piece.
If you can get away with using, you know, loop libraries and construction kits in that way, there's some great stuff out there. Funk Soul makes some great stuff. You know, there's just some, you know, like I was saying, like there's something about when it's in a particular setting, to me, it rises above. So let me just give an example, and I'll see if I can actually share my screen. Now, granted, again, I'll remind you guys that these are actual raw files directly out of off of the SIM card. Like nothing's been edited at all yet, and I just dumped all the raw files. Well, not all of them, but a chunk of raw files into Machine real quick. I'm going to share my screen, and I'll give examples of some things that I recorded today, and maybe we can kind of discuss that a little bit. Let me find my screen share here. So here we are. Yeah, this should do it. So hopefully you can see it. Yes?
Yeah. No.
Okay, so...
Now I see it.
Okay, so... And we'll see about hearing it as well. Let me... I'm probably going to end up... You know what I'm going to do is... Should I compress it a little bit on the master, or should I just push the volume? It's hard to say because we don't know what we have recorded here, because like I said, it was all field recording. So now one thing that I do like to do is, and I'm going to bring the start end up a bit and the end, I tend to leave a lot of space as much as possible around the front and back of the samples when I'm recording, because you never know when you're editing later on, especially if you normalize a file or you compress a file. You might find out later on that there's hidden sound inside of here that you weren't aware of previously. So, for instance, if I take this file and I'm going to hit it once, and hopefully we'll be able to hear it. Actually, I'll hit it a couple of times so that we can hear it. Okay, now could you guys hear that?
Yeah. Yep. But yeah.
Yeah. Let me actually do it like this. I got a better way of doing this. So we'll do it. Yeah, I'm gonna do it like this. I got a way to get better sound out to everyone. So what I'm gonna do is my master is actually gonna go out directly to the world. This should be better now. So let's hopefully see if we can hear this a little bit better now. Can you guys hear that better now?
Yeah, it's a little better.
Okay, so now this one is recorded with a lot of headroom on it, and you know I kept the mic pretty low on it, but I'm going to normalize this file real quick, and we'll see what we can pull out of it. Now this reverb trail, I'm going to truncate this down, and I'm going to bring this back here. I'm going to normalize just the reverb trail back here. We'll actually bring it right about, actually yeah, we'll bring it to here. So let's see what happens here. So now this is just a reverb trail. So a lot of times I'll take things like that and I'll put those in as convolution impulse responses.
Nice.
So now I can use this space as an impulse response.
Load it right into Guitar Rig.
And here's another good example of something that I'll do. I'll grab a different random.
Both Contact and Guitar Rig allow impulse responses. What else does?
Logic has a great impulse response reverb. There's actually, I'm trying to remember the name of it. There's a guitar amplifier emulator that takes impulse responses as well. I can't remember the name of it off the top of that. There's
Waves,
a lot of.
I use the one with Waves.
So here's a good file here as well. Now this is interesting because let's normalize this, and I'm gonna kind of boost my master a bit. Now that reverb trail kind of gets really weird, right? And if we boost it on the back here, I want you to kind of hear what's happening. You hear how there's like all this movement going on in there?
Yeah.
So what that is that's actually a contact mic that's been placed on a large chain link fence, and I'm at one end of the chain link fence just tapping the chain link fence, and I'm getting the reverb all the way through the chain link fence.
Very cool.
That's cool.
Here's another example, and where you have the contact mic and you know what you're doing with it is going to dictate, you know, what sort of reverbs and sounds you'll get off of those. Okay, jumping into some different style sounds here. Let's see, we have, I want to grab some of these other files here. So when I record these files, oftentimes what I'll do is I'll separate them in folders to kind of let me know what I was kind of roundabout recording at the time, because often if I'm using the field recorder, I'm not naming the folders at that moment. So a lot of the times I'll say what I'm recording right before I make the strike, you know. Now here we are. So this folder is mostly like mechanical noises and different things of that nature. So
Crazy metal scrapes.
these metal scrapes. Okay, so and of course that goes on. Like so, I'll do long scrapes and short scrapes, and you know.
Aggressive metal scrapes.
And you see there, I tagged the sample.
Lex, I have a question for you.
Sure.
If you took a sample like this, could you turn that into a functional kick drum?
Like this one right here?
Yeah.
Yeah, but to me, this is also one of those things where it becomes, and I'm going to duplicate this over to a new group so you can kind of see what I can do, just using machine and not going too deep. I would prefer to take the best out of a sound as opposed to forcing a sound into a box.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
So it's kind of like when you see people say, like, you know, oh, well, we're going to fix it in the mix. It's less about fixing it in the mix, and it's more about getting the best take and then sculpting from there. So for a sound like this, if anything, if I was going to turn it into any drum, it's going to be between hi-hats and snares, you know?
Because
And
in my situation, imagine a classroom filled with kids who are going to be making their recordings with iPhones. So our
okay.
source material is going to be weak. And if we want to add punch to something to make it sound more like a kick, to serve the role of a kick, in a situation like that where it's not ideal, are there tricks to making it more kick-like?
Well, certainly creative EQ is going to help out. So, for instance, I took that scrape, and right now I have it. I'm kind of aiming it more towards a snare right now because it's closer to that timbrely, you know. But I'm going to show you. I'll show you quickly a way of kind of going between the two. So I'll actually do both. So we'll say that one right there will end up being a kick. This one right here will end up being a snare. Okay,
awesome.
And this top one will be a hi-hat. Okay, and again, like typically speaking, I'm gonna more just go and grab the best out of it and turn it into what I think it is gonna sound most like. But for instance, let's say we want this to be more of a hi-hat. So what I'm gonna do now is on the sound level, all right, the first thing I want to do is I'm taking everything to a single polyphony, and I'm making everything cut itself off just to make it so that we don't hear everything over top of each other. Okay, so I'm going to turn this into an ADSR, right? And then I'm going to do this as like minimalistically as possible. So just so you understand why I'm doing it the way that I'm doing it. So I have a bandpass filter on it, and I'm bringing it up pretty high, right? What I'll do now is I'm also going to, let's go ahead and use the plate reverb on here a little bit. And we're going to take the delay down, and then the mix down. Okay. So, and I'm going to bring the low shelf up. I'm keeping the high damper open, and then what I can do is I'm going to sample this to a new pad now, and let's take this to internal, to detect, start. So oftentimes when I do this, I'll do two separate samples, one where I hold it down for a second and one where it's shorter. Okay, so now the shorter one is the one that I'm going to end up using here. And I try not to really normalize too much of a hi-hat sample because you don't want it to be as loud as a snare drum or other things. I try to think about, you know, how big the sample is going to be in a mix, and try to keep it there, you know, dynamic range and everything. So now at this point, I've got this sample. I'm going to kind of trim it up a little bit more. And this is kind of like a closed hi-hat here. And then I'm going to go back to this other one. And I'm going to normalize this back half without the transient in the front. I actually really like that end. I'm going to normalize just that end. Okay, so yeah, so I'm going to sample that, and then okay, and we'll put the bandpass on this. High pass over here, drop it down a little bit of resonance. So now if I play these two together and I sample them, I can do like, oh, yeah. So now that could be a hi-hat right there where I take it, and if I use this as a hi-hat, so it'd be like a found sound hi-hat where and I probably would pitch up the end of it the
It
end
also
of the
kind of
same
sounds like a
filter.
snare, like when you take your stick on a snare and rub it against the skin.
Exactly. So which gives you like a lot of depth as far as how you're going to play it, you know, timbrely in a mix. Now, if you're going to start trying to make it go towards a kick, you would do the exact opposite, you know. So I would, I'm actually going to go attack, hold, decay. About here. Now we're going to go low pass. Beef it up a bit. And realistically, this is where a third-party filters really kind of come in handy, because this filter isn't really going to boost it quite as much. Now I'm going to give it some compression, a little bit of drive, and I'll probably end up resampling this a bunch. So I'm going to duplicate this over real quick and then resample it onto itself. Sometimes I do it this way just because it's kind of like an old way that I used to work on the ASRX, where it would give you a scratch pad and you could duplicate from your scratch pad. So now what I'm going to do is just, so now I have this really quiet sample. You can see it on the screen. It's very small and you know, it's not much, but when I normalize it, it's much bigger now, you know? Now, when you low pass everything out like that, and you're stuck with something like this, you still need to have that kick transient in the front. Otherwise, it's just going to be a sub kick. So now I'll start layering it. So I could layer it with that hi-hat type piece that I had earlier. Or I could take the one that's going to be a snare. I can shorten it a good bit. All right, let's actually move this to an attack, hold, decay with a very short... Alright, and then we're going to probably band pass it, drop it low. Oh, I have it choke grouped. That's right. Let me take that off real quick. Right about here. I'm actually going to sample reduce it and bit reduce it a little bit. Right about there. So now I'm going to pad link these two together so that when I sample it, it's going to come out as one piece. So let's go ahead and do that. So now I've got this kind of, you know, not quite 808, not quite acoustic kick drum. All right, and then I can go back to the one that's going to end up being a snare. Let's unpad link this. All right, and make this longer. Oh, hold on now. Take this off. So we're going to go ADSR. And there's not much that needs to be done here. This is where I would get into, you know, taking the best out of the sample. So there's not a whole heck of a lot that really even needs to be done here. I do like the kind of bit reduced sound on this one a little bit. It kind of makes it just a little bit grungier and kind of like a, you know, like a gritty snare. A little bit of drive on it also kind of rounds out the harmonics on it a little bit. And depending on how I do this, I might EQ it down a little bit. Now I'm going to actually add a second filter on this one. Reason being, so what I'm doing here is I'm using the initial EQ to kind of make it slightly less harsh on me, but I still want to kind of have this resonance peak doing its thing to kind of push it up a bit. So to me, that's actually kind of a cool snare, and maybe add a little bit more crack to the front. So you can play around with transient shapers. I try not to get too deep with the transient shaping on it because it makes it really easy for you to clip them out. But just to give an example, like and I'm trying to keep it to just stuff that's inside a machine, to just, you know, keep this as minimal as possible. But I'm going to raise the attack just a bit. a little bit of sustain as well, while still keeping that short decay on the sound. And we'll go ahead and sample this. Oh, actually, let's do it here. So now, if I was to take this, pop it over here, and I'll explain what I'm doing in just a second here. This here. So now I'm, kind of getting to a kit, and then once I get to that kit area to where it's starting to sound in place, that's when I start mixing them together to kind of make everything sound cohesive in the same realm. But these are all the same sample, this all came from the same sound source, and this one right here would actually, I didn't change the envelope on it yet, so let me actually, there we go. And then, of course, you would pad mute that, so it would choke group it. Maybe even, kind of like, so you would duplicate your kick and then kind of take one a little bit lower.
That's not an actual kick. That's a functional kick right there. It's
yeah.
I mean, you wouldn't want to make a kick, but it works.
And again, that's kind of going around the bend a bit, because I'm using a sound that's not necessarily prime for a kick, but stretching it to make it work for me. You know what I mean?
Exactly. That was my exact question. I like what you did.
So so a lot of the things that we're recording, a lot of it does come down to like making sure that there's a lot of organization as far as how you're recording too, so that you can kind of somewhat remember what the hell you just recorded.
As you go along.
Yeah, after I get back from a session, I usually come home and I name it like right away. Like I try to get right into naming. So that way it's still fresh in my mind what I did, because I'm not going to sit there and name 350 samples while I'm out there on the site. So this is so this is interesting. I want to show you guys what this is real quick. This sample right here, and all I did was normalize it, is a Korg MS-20. Sitting inside of a large concrete garage on top of a upside-down trash can, and then I hooked a guitar amplifier to it in the same space, and the microphones are out in the space. So I was getting sounds like this. So the reverb that you hear there is actually, the real room, and I'll play around with, because I'm not always 100, like I have an idea where I'm going, but I'm not 100% sure where I'm going to end up. So I'll do everything from single hits, going up and down the keyboard, to effect sounds, to rhythms. So, and then I'll probably chop that up later, and I mean, if I normalize just this end, you can hear how crazy it is. And these things can later be further manipulated in post to, increase fidelity and make it way more fun to play with. Way more audibly pleasing for the listener. I mean, that's just something very. That's something very simple, but as we get into doing multi-band compression and EQ and using it in different ways, we can get some great stuff. And like I said, I like to do my own impulse responses. So then I'll take sounds like that, throw them into a convolution reverb, and then play with that. Which I just recently did that video where I kind of showed other techniques with it more like rhythmic techniques and pad sounds and things. But if you get your own sounds from your own spaces, you can really get creative with how you deal with that.
One thing too, Richard, as far as kicks go, you can also play around with tone generators and such, and just find a frequency that fits the sample, and just kind of go with it. Kind of gate it.
Yeah, the only thing is for this project, it's the limitations are the whole point of the project. So like I kind of have to stick to the whole goal is to sell the idea. Take a kid with a microphone, have him go collect 5 sounds, and he can make something cool in a week.
Right, right.
So it's like all within one software package. So the tone generator we might not have access to.
Yeah.
It's kind of it goes against my case for what I'm doing right now is a very strange one. It's not not what I'm normally working on a regular basis. Yeah. I'm not into polishing turds. I'd rather have a good kick drum, but for this one, we have to learn how to polish the turd.
And that's getting back to like I say, like mic placement. You are they going to be recording the sounds themselves, and what you were doing was more demonstration purposes, or how is that going to work?
We're selling the idea that this will make a great course, and so we've written up a course outline, and then this is going to be a 2-minute video that kind of sells it. And so, yeah, I mean, wait, what was the question?
Well, are they going to be actually recording their own sounds, or are they using the rough and tumble sounds that you already did?
No, they're going to be recording their own sounds. So imagine on day one of it's a week-long session. On day one, they come in and they go around with iPhones and they record sounds. And then they learn a little bit about machine, how it works. They learn about sound, and by the end of the week, they transform that collection of sounds that they collected into a piece of art.
Sure. The only thing
that's the goal of the course.
The only thing that drives me nuts about doing that is file management on iPhones.
Well, I figure what we're going to do is we'll use Dropbox, and we'll just let them record right away, and then we'll take it right away, get it into the computer, put it into an audio editor, chop it up, and then get it in Machine.
Sure. Yeah, that's interesting. Now, Casey, have you had to do any things during your courses with any like found sound type techniques or anything like that?
I have not done much of that. Usually the stuff that they give us is like a pre-packaged plan to do stuff with. And as far as experimental stuff, that's pretty much left up to us. So if they give us a project, to see who can create the most, creative, 1 minute, piece with, your own sounds that you recorded, that's when the students will, go out, record their own stuff, and make what they make.
Yeah, I think one interesting thing about what Rich is saying is, so this is going to be aimed at a pretty young age group. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's going to be kids, middle school kids.
Oh, that's cool. So you
small classes of about 10 kids.
And where is this located at?
Well, hopefully all around the country. The idea is to sell the course, and we're going to prototype the course this summer for probably 2 different weeks. And then for the next summer, it would be at like maybe 10 or 15 locations with other teachers teaching the curriculum.
Very cool.
So
yeah, that's
of course
cool.
We have to sell a couple of guys that are the head guys there. They really liked what we showed them so far, and so it looks like it's going to happen. It's on Monday the head honchos are going to be watching the demonstrations, and hopefully they're all going to dig it, and then I have to write the course, which is a little bit tougher, but I think it could be a great course. I think it'd be a lot of fun, man. If I was in middle school, I'd love that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that sounds like a blast to me. I will say that I used to be really disgruntled as far as how some of the middle school type sound courses were going for a lot of different people, and I went out and I had visited a few different newer schools and schools who actually had funding, which is hit or miss, and I found some really interesting things. I mean, these days you're seeing a lot more of DAW software in music classes, music technology classes, MIDI controllers, things of that nature. Whereas, when I was in school, that wasn't the case. So,
this isn't a school though, by the way. This is a camp.
Yeah.
It's a science camp. So it's
Yeah.
STEM, science, technology, engineering, and something. I don't even know what the M is. But it has to be a science purpose. So like one thing that's important is we're going to have no keyboards, no piano keyboards in the room. They're going to have to be working from alternative controllers because they're not going to have music backgrounds.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing about this course is that the prerequisite is no music background. So to be able to work with something alternative like 16 pads is a great way for someone who has no music background to be able to make something pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and
Never
there's a
afraid
lot
of
of
keyboards.
alternative sources out there, you know, as far as controller input for kids these days as well. So
Yeah, we're looking at those little Korgs. You know the little Korg mini things that are this big? Like a little smaller
like
than a beat step.
you talking like this? Like these guys?
Exactly. But without the keys. They want the one like they make a few models. One has knobs, one has faders.
Like this?
Exactly. And that's the kind of stuff we're going to be using.
Yeah, so
We're going to buy a bunch of those.
What don't you have, Flux? That's the question.
Electron gear. I keep trying to tell them to send me stuff. I really want some Electron gear,
Electron
really,
stuff.
really bad.
The Electron stuff is sick.
It is. Oh man, very lust-worthy. The stuff that they're doing right now in hardware form is the stuff that has me excited. You know,
I don't think I'll ever own any of it, but I know I'd love to.
You know, I feel like I'm getting closer every day. I feel like I'm having difficulty in justifying not having it. If that makes any sense in a reverse way. But yeah, Electron is high on my list of awesome stuff. So I also wanted to talk about like just happy accidents in general, and just to give you a quick idea on that, I came across something pretty interesting the other day. I was just playing around and I was messing with some after I got done editing a group of samples, and I started listening to some old music that I had done from roughly like 8 to 10 years ago. And a lot of the stuff was direct MPC bounce outs, you know, from just straight from the zip disk, you know, bounce it out, and it is what it is. So, and I posted one of them up on my SoundCloud just for fun. But I kind of started finding that I forgot how often I was able to get that I shouldn't do, like get these little like glitches and oddness that would happen that weren't technically programmed into it, but sounded really cool, and they weren't always 100% reproducible either. There's very little of that in the plugin world. I mean, I can get that with like Reactor sometimes, but there's not a lot of software that glitches on me in ways that I can get those same kind of interesting musical problems. And I was just wondering if you guys ran into anything similar to that. Like, is there anything in your workflow that gives you guys happy accidents?
All the time.
Really?
I mean, I do two types of writing. One type of writing I do is where, like, literally I'll imagine the piece in my mind and I'll copy it out exact. And I'll get the melody exactly as I hear it. I'll get the bass line as I hear it, and I'll try to mimic what I'm thinking and what I'm feeling. But a lot of time, when I'm just making art, if I'm just straight up making stuff, I let the sounds dictate, and I just tweak away, and I look for those happy accidents, and the happy accident becomes a piece. I'm a big fan of happy accidents, and I try to make them happen all the time. That's like my favorite thing to do.
Yeah.
Just experimenting and trying to find something cool.
How about you, Casey? And you're more in the engineering world as well, so
Yeah, I
have any
like
technique?
well, on the producing end, I'd say is where it happens the most.
Sure.
Usually, if I decide to sit down and produce something, you know, or compose something, what I do is if I come up with a cool little riff or a cool little creative snippet of something, and I really really like it, like it's just I'm attached to it. What I'll do is I'll just solo that, throw a filter on it, you know, and just cycle through sounds. Just hit the down key on my keyboard, and 9 times out of 10 I'll find the dopest sound that fits that pattern, and that on its own will become a whole separate composition based strictly on that. And that's probably the most happy accident wise thing that I have, producing wise. But engineering wise, it's a combination of things, man. It's just there's so many plugins that do so many things that you just, sometimes you go a little overboard, start throwing all kinds of plugins on something, and just totally demolish the sound, come up with some cool stuff.
The dangerous of happy accidents is if you count on them, it can be dangerous. If you're under the gun and you have to write something quick, you have one night to write something that has to be effective, you have to, along with being able to explore happy accidents and stuff like that, it's important, I think, to be able to realize what you imagine, to be able to get it down in machine or in a DAW what you're thinking without accidents. Because sometimes when you're under the gun, you just have to be able to nail it. You have to be able to take an idea and make it happen. So I think there's two ends to the spectrum there. That being able to nail what you're thinking is important, and then being able to explore is also awesome. I mean, I prefer happy accidents, but there's a lot of times when I'm under time pressure and there's nothing you can do. You have a piece that has to be written. You need to write it first and then just record it.
Yeah, I think the things that give me the most happy accidents are usually external to software. So I don't get into doing too much DAW arrangement these days. So I don't have any little weird things where I'm slicing up audio and moving it around and getting glitches in that way. I do get it a lot with the modular especially. Which
modular's all happy accidents, isn't it?
Yeah.
I would say a good 75%, depending on how much you want to admit.
But here's the thing, I'm not bashing happy accidents. My pleasure, when I'm making music just for fun, just for me, and I'm just messing around, it's all about the happy accident.
I will tell you that I specifically bought a piece for happy accidents recently. And that would be this guy right here, the Phonogene.
Your camera quality is great.
Well, that's because I'm a man. I do man things with my man hands.
Oh, seriously, man, that's a really clear picture.
I was actually just looking at new webcams the other day to increase my quality, so I'm happy to hear that. So the Phonogene, I specifically got just for that because it's basically like a tape machine and granular sampler in a modular format where I can slice up audio and break things kind of on the fly and using control voltage and all that good stuff.
So it's a sample-based.
And it allows me. What's that?
It's a sample-based modular piece?
Yes.
How do you get the samples in it?
Well, a few different ways. One, I mean, it has an audio input jack on it.
Okay.
So it's got audio input on it, and then I can send either actual modular signals into it, or I can send any of my other gear into it. So like the way I have my patch bay and everything set up on here, like anytime I turn up my effects send on my mixer, I'm sending into my modular, which usually what I'll do is, like, the first piece in the chain is a anamodule trana module because it's a really versatile input module. So you can send synthesizer level stuff into it, but you can also send line level into it, and it will boost it to synthesizer level. And then it also has a speaker output on it. Like, it has a speaker built into the module itself, right? So if I was right now, I'm coming out of the mix output, but if I come out of the speaker output and then turn the speaker up, it acts as a dummy load and it distorts the signal the way that the speaker would if the speaker was overloading. So, and then I can send that, so whatever sources, be it iPad, be it, my main rig over here, be it anything, into the input stage on here, and then, I can mangle it, it can chop sounds up. I mean, it's really, really over the top crazy.
Now, when you sample it, does it add character like an old MPC does?
Yes, very much so, because it's not super high fidelity, and it allows you to do things like, if you want, I can kind of give you a quick demonstration of how it sounds.
Yeah,
But so essentially what it'll do, though, is it'll allow you to chop slices up not only into slices like traditional 16th note or whatever, but you can also go by grain size. So you can do granular synthesis with it as well. To give an example, I'll just put a let me erase some of these found sounds, and then I'll just show you like a what a drum break sounds like.
Give me 1 second before you give the example.
Absolutely.
I need to take a leak. Give me 1 second.
Sure. I'm gonna be setting this up, and Casey, I know that you don't have all day today, so I wanted to ask how much time you have left.
I'd say another 10 minutes or so would be cool.
Okay, we'll do this real quick. So let's send this guy over here. Okay, this is let's kind of bring this down a bit. And how are we gonna do this? Let me actually, yeah, I'm gonna send this out into the modular real quick, and the modular is coming back on here. So let me actually see if we can do this first. Take this out of here. Output. Let me get a direct out. I'm not gonna run it through filters or anything else. I'm just gonna run it straight out, so you guys can get an idea as to what it does. So let's take all these down and see if we can get some sound. Yes, yes, yes. And this is going to go here. This is going to go here. This is going to go here. And okay. Okay, so we'll do that. And let's make sure we're getting sound here. This is gonna be interesting. trying to do modular on the fly like this is not typically recommended, but we'll see what happens here. And send this here.
More like a well thought out chess game.
So let me just erase this stuff. So that clicking that you're hearing is actually the module kind of doing its thing. So let's go ahead and so it's not a perfect loop right now, but I have that. This is the sound of the phonogene working right now, and I'm just going to kind of hold this and tweak it. Can you hear it?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, and I'll actually let's bring it up a little bit. Okay, so if I adjust this gene size here, so I can get that. I can also slice up the samples by hitting the slice button. So now, as I move this, I'm getting different. Okay, and what I can do with that, what's really cool with this is if you take it and send, there's a little button on here, or a little input I should say, called Organize. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to send an LFO into it to control it. And this is where the happy accidents come in. So now the LFO is telling it what slice to play. And I can kind of adjust how much of it I want. And I can slow it down, of course. And you can just kind of and you can get all kinds of weirdness out of it and get glitches and See, my camera's kind of going a little bit wonky here. Try to do it like this. So, yeah, and you can, so it's basically like a tape machine that you can kind of just do ridiculousness with it and get those happy accidents really fast. I can send stuff out of it, like an LFO, into the gene size to change the size of the slices. So, moving on, because modular can end up taking you all year, and you know that's just how modular time works. So yeah, like that, I got that specifically so that I could have more fun with happy accidents. And you were asking about like MPC sound and all that kind of stuff. I do still keep the MPC in the back over here, back here somewhere. Yeah.
How hard is it to run samples through an MPC to give, say I recorded a drum kit and I wanted to kind of run it through an MPC to give it that low bit sound? Is it difficult to achieve a good result?
To me, it's heavily overrated when it comes to that. The MPC sound to me is, it's there. There is a sound to it, but it's not one of those things where it's like you can't get it in other ways. And really, to get the best out of it, you have to do certain things that end up taking you longer that you could probably get in other ways faster. So to me, it's like, you know, if you're working with an MPC 60 or MPC 3000, you know, you can certainly get bit crunchy sound out of it very fast. If you're working with something like this one back here is the 2000 XL. If you're working with something like that, it's 16-bit, 44.1, but it has bit reduction in it. But the processing to do the bit reduction takes forever, and you can overdrive the preamps a little bit. You can make it sound a little bit crunchier. It does have a nice snappy, punchy sound to it, but in my personal opinion, I think a lot of the MPC sound so much is more a fond remembering of music from that time, as opposed to a legitimate difficult thing to achieve through other means. Like, there is very, very good emulations out there, very, very good, and in my opinion, better sounding bit reduction and grungy techniques than just that. There's other samplers that I would agree 100% that I think, you know, the sound is the sound, and you know it's really difficult to get it just right.
The ASR?
SP12, ASR, I prefer those sounds over you know, over trying to get an MPC. I would more try to get an SP12 you know, sped up then slowed down type of bit crunch sound before I would try to get an MPC type sound. You know, even when talking about the older MPCs as well, just because I personally prefer that sound. I always have. Same with like the EPS and EPS 16 Plus. And a lot of that also gets back to the instant sound that you get through those by running it through those systems. The MPC, I want to say it was 60, does have an analog filter on it, but it's like non-resonant, and it's not, it didn't really, you know, to me, the method of going through like the old EPS 16, it sounds way cooler, but it takes so much effort to get it out of it because those discs are ancient, and the boot time on the machine sucks, and it's just, there's a lot about it to not want to deal with, which is why, you know, I start looking at other things. Like there's great bit reduction pedals and gear out there. The Auto Biscuit, or I don't know how they pronounce it. It's French, I think, so it's Biscuit or something. I don't know. In Eurorack form, there's the Malgorithm 2 and the Geiger counter. There's lots of different other ways of getting cool sounds like that these days, where you don't need the entire piece of gear. It just gives you what you want. And so I prefer that personally. And if I really want to go through, like, you know, old
Are there
school,
any plugins that can do it well?
old school Akai filter right here, I'll run through that a lot. Yeah, you know what? There's actually a few that are really awesome that I really like. I will say that the emulations in Machine for that sort of sound is really, really close. Like, it's really good. I've done a lot of A/Bing between them, and it's so close to the point where once you get that sound, and then you do any sort of post-processing, be it a compressor, anything, any kind of EQ, you do anything at all, reverb, whatever, you're not going to be able to tell which one was which after that. You know what I mean? Like, if you put them side by side and you're really, really trying, you're going to be able to hear, okay, well, I know that I did this one and this one. But if you do any post-processing after it, forget the difference. It doesn't matter. But I would say there's some really cool ones out there. There's a plugin called Premutate. I think I'm pronouncing it correctly. I forget the...
What is it?
It's called Premutate.
Premu?
Yeah, it's like a computer program, almost like a Commodore 64 or something emulation. It's really crazy, and it's awesome, man. It sounds so good. I want to see. Oh, here it is. Sonic Charge makes it, and let me see if I can. I'll give a screen share of their website if I can find it. Here it is. I highly recommend it. It's really quirky, but it's awesome. I mean, it's really, really cool. So they describe it as embraces the sound of primitive signal processing hardware at its core. It's a 12-bit digital delay with variable sample rate from 0 to 352 kilohertz, which is really low. And yeah, it's got all these little quirks in it. Like, you can actually like run like weird little programs inside of it. Like, it's very, very interesting. I'll show you. This is it right here. Sonic Charge is the name of the website. So I recommend going and checking that out if you're looking for a effect that is very unique, fun, and it's not even expensive. It's what, $66? Just awesome sounding, and it is 64-bit, which is a plus because I don't use anything but 64-bit plugins. So
Very cool.
So I think with that we should probably end because I know that Casey has to go back to being awesome. And I don't want to keep him any longer. So I'll let Casey sign off first.
Take it easy, guys. I'm sure I'll be back.
All right, and Richard.
Peace out, everyone. Thanks for having me, Flux.
Yeah, no problems, man. No problems. And I am Flux of fluxwithit.com, and again, Rich of Richard London Sound Design, Sound Labs. Yes.
Well, Richard London Sound Design is my business where I do sound design work for companies, and then London Sound Lab is for Instruments for Machine.
There we go.
It is not there yet.
Okay. And Casey, do you have any websites or anything, or?
Nope. You need engineering work? Google me or hit Flux up.
Yeah. And thank you guys for coming and watching, and be sure to like, share, comment, all that good stuff, and peace. Go Eagles!